Ready. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. Around this time last year, the legislature passed a substantial property tax increase on Vermonters over my veto. Since then, I've been clear. We can't keep doing what we're doing and expecting different results because it's not helping our kids or doing right by taxpayers. And I know many lawmakers in the building feel the same way. We've had constructive conversations with legislators and leadership throughout the session, and there is agreement. We need bold education transformation this session rather than kicking the can further down the road. To level set expectations, and as I said last week, if either the House or Senate versions of the education bill were sent to my desk today, I wouldn't be able to support them because they spend too much money and the transformation is stretched out too far. But having said that, I believe we can find a path forward. The plan I outlined in January was designed to make our education system more equitable, transparent, and effective. It focused on student needs and a more sufficient and efficient governance structure and provide better opportunities for every student in Vermont, while also creating a funding structure that's clear, affordable, and sustainable. These remain my objectives today. Earlier this week, I sent a letter to the conferees outlining what must be included in their final agreement in order to prevent a veto. First, the funding system. Right now, Vermont spends more per pupil than nearly every other state in the country. And data shows we're not getting the best return on our investment. I believe we can improve performance and opportunities without spending more than we are today by transforming the system. And the foundation formula model we offered can accomplish our shared objectives. Next, the timeline. There's a fine line between allowing enough time to make necessary changes and too much time where we delay these changes. Making this transition on a faster timeline is essential to achieve success. And I think 4 years is too long and will make implementation much more difficult. Finally, as we move forward, we must keep property taxes in mind. Both the House and Senate versions of H 454 could lead to significant property tax increases in districts that spend less. We must not penalize communities that are more economically disadvantaged and have done the best they can to live within their means and simply cannot absorb another double-digit rate increase. My original proposal in January contemplated much lower spending than what's currently offered in H 454. And while we consider these areas of the bill, we can't lose sight of education quality. Our plan is focused on student outcomes, investing dollars where they'll have the greatest impact. We can do this by making sure teachers are paid fairly, expanding access to CTE, supporting preschool, and making sure every student receives a well-rounded education. We have a real opportunity this session to transform our education system into something that works better for our kids and for taxpayers. I look forward to our continued conversations with legislative leadership and lawmakers in the coming days and finding a bipartisan path forward that most of us can support. With that, I'll open it up to questions.
Governor, you mentioned the way that the bills are being rolled out now, it would raise property taxes in some low-spending towns, something to the tune of 20 or 30%. But isn't that because of the timeline that you, like a faster timeline that you'd like with rolling out the foundation formula? How do you square keeping property taxes in line in short term, but also this aggressive timeline that you
We just need a transition to get where we need to go. And this doesn't, what's being contemplated today and what, as opposed to what we were contemplating, moves us in the wrong direction in that regard. So we need to protect, I believe, we need to protect some of these communities that have done, again, really hard work and are just spending what they can. They can't afford more. And this will penalize them for spending less at this point in time. So I think there's a fix for that. And I think there are members of the conferees, the conference committees, that see a path forward. So I think we have to listen to them.
You've been around this building long enough to know sort of how these issues work and sort of the pace of work here. Is there enough time here? I mean, what do you see as a timeline of the conference committee and your team coming to an agreement on a bill?
Yeah, the building is, there's nothing set in stone, but I will say, I mean, you take last session when there were 75 bills, I think, passed in 3 days. So when there's the will, there's the way. And if they want to do something, if they want to accomplish this and give us what we need in terms of education, transformation, in terms of this housing crisis that we all campaigned on, but we don't seem to be moving far enough ahead on that. I heard today that even some of the regulatory reform is not even going to be taken up. So there's still a path forward, and we still have time to make this happen, but you have to have the will to do it. So again, I think in some instances, my conversations with legislative leadership leads me to believe there is a path forward, and then we can work this out, and we can get to where we want to go. But it could be a bumpy ride in doing so.
Governor, you said in this conversation, incoming days with legislators. I'm hearing that some of the members of the legislature are planning to head off on pre-planned vacations next week. Is that part of your? How does that strike you? Does that concern you, or is that understandable?
Well, it could work both ways, right? I mean, if there are typically when you go into later. Go into overtime with the legislative session, as I've seen. I've myself have been in here when I was in the Senate. We were in until mid-June 1 year. So you lose members along the way because of those planned vacations, as well as job opportunities. They need to get back to work. So that happens. And so you have to deal with it. But it could be both sides of the equation.
Is the fact that most of what you've led with here in this press conference got the Education Conference Committee in that effort and not the housing, a sign that maybe you're feeling that there's a path for the education bill at the moment, but maybe there's not much of a path for the housing bill?
No, I think there's a path forward with both, but I did talk about the regulatory aspect is really disappointing that isn't moving forward. The wetlands designation in particular is something that's concerning, especially in this county. Washington County is going to be on the losing end of this if we don't have some wetland redesignation. And I, for the life of me, I don't understand why that isn't being taken up. But they are going to be losing out. Barry, Montpelier, and Plainfield.
That was a concern, I think, that development might be built closer than currently allowed to wetlands, and that would cause some environmental degradation.
Well, again, I think that there's the wetland designation. I think it makes some sense if we can have some common lines drawn so that we know where we can build and where we can't, for sure. I think that would be essential to the future, and you're going to have winners and losers on that.
You had a housing bill that had the CHIP program that you care so much about for infrastructure to get built for new housing, but it may be set to the side some of the regulatory changes you're referring to. Do you think you could support that?
Well, they're separating the two, so it doesn't sound like we're going to have any regulatory reform, as I understand it. And I don't see a vehicle that it can be put onto. But the housing bill, I think could pass, but in its present form, again, the House version is not something that I could accept. The Senate version is something that could be very, very helpful. So if they went and leaned towards the Senate version, then we could all go home and feel as though we've done something with housing. Maybe half of what we should be doing, without the regulatory reform is going to make it more difficult. But again, this would be very helpful with the Senate version.
It sounds like the House members on the committee are expressing significant flexibility to move closer to the Senate's
Well, that'd
position.
be easy then. You know, all they have to do is sign off.
Yeah.
Say, you're right, Senate. This is exactly what we need. In fact, maybe we should go back to Spark, which is something that we had contemplated in the beginning, that is far superior to both of those. But I digress.
Was there a cap? Was there a cap on Spark? There was no cap on.
I don't think we had a cap on Spark. No.
That's one of the sticking points there. Thank you.
Conferees have wrapped on the bill that deals with the future of the motel hotel program. It was on the Senate floor earlier this morning. Is that a compromise you're going to be able to support?
I haven't seen the final version, but they would have had to move a long ways to get my support.
And can you point to the elements of that?
I'd rather look at the bill. Be happy to answer it after I look at what they agreed to.
Governor, later today, tonight in Essex, I think, there's another public hearing for the proposed Amazon warehouse. Are you familiar with the proposal, the pushback? What do you make of it all?
Yeah. Again, I don't know all the intricacies of the proposal. I know that there's a lot of pushback within the community. I understand it, you know, more traffic and so forth, and maybe not the jobs that they want. But economic development is economic development, so I think we should at least be open to the concept, but I don't know the particulars. I don't know how big the building's going to be or even where it's going to be. Sounds like they're dealing with it on the local level, though.
Going back to the big education bill, is there a world where, say, there can be compromise found where, say, they spend less, but the timeline is still 4 years, or the timeline shortened, so the money's not quite where you want it, that you would be able to sign something, or do you need those quarter changes done? to be
I
able to
mean,
sign
I laid out, that's the red line for me. We've seen what happens here in this building. 4 years is a long time, and next year doesn't ever seem to happen. So we need to make sure that we pay attention to this. I think 4 years is way too long to implement this transformation, and I think we can get it done in 2 years. So we'll see. I mean, I can't live with 4 years.
What assurance can you give people that you'll be here to oversee that implementation?
I can't.
You can't?
I can't give any.
So you might not be around to...
They have even if I did run, they'd have a voice in that as well. So I can't give any assurances.
Even given the scope of the education bill, there'll still be so many details to hash out in the next few years. It seems like there's growing concern in rural communities about what this could mean for them. There was a school district that just pulled out of the School Boards Association, given their concerns about the bill. I guess what do you say to some of these smaller rural communities that fear this big bill is coming for them and their schools?
No, I understand their fears, and I sympathize with the position we find ourselves in. Right? It's not something we want. We want to be on offense, not on defense. I feel like we're having to scale back because we're overbuilt for our needs. We have schools, a number of schools that are much larger than needed in some areas, and then we have small schools that really are costly and don't satisfy the need either. So it's a difficult time. I'd rather us focus on economic development, trying to make Vermont stronger, bringing more people into the state. Our demographics are working against us, and it's a part of our overall effort to drive the economy, grow the economy, so that we can put more kids in our schools and we can grow rather than pull back. But we have to scale back to what the overall system has for us. I mean, we have too much overhead for the number of students we have. It's as simple as that.
Heading into the last elections, U.S. voters for backup in this building. And I'm wondering, as you reflect on this first session with this new partisan dynamic, what you could point to as concrete examples of ways in which having more Republicans in this building has helped you advance your agenda.
I think you're seeing it real time right now. I don't think we'd be having some of these conversations about education if we were back with a supermajority. I don't think we would take any of it up. We wouldn't get to a conference committee. So same with housing. I don't think we would have gotten to a conference committee. So having that backup is force leadership in the House and Senate to deal with this. And again, my hat's off to them. We've had some very productive conversations, and they've been willing to listen, where they weren't willing to listen for the last 2 years previous to this. So I think it's been extremely helpful.
All right, we'll switch over to the phones now. Ed Barber, Newport Daily Express.
Good afternoon, Governor. I know there's a lot of iterations that are coming out of the foundation formula. I live in Derby, which is a low-spending town. We've taken care of our school buildings, so we don't have a lot of needs in terms of fixing infrastructure. Yet under the most recent iteration, our education property taxes are going to go up by 30 cents. What is the point of taking a model town that keeps its tax rates low, spends well on its students, gives them a good education and an equitable education, and punish us by increasing 30 cents, which is a huge increase in our tax rate?
Yeah, that's the very example, your town, many other towns around the state that I talked about, why we shouldn't be penalizing those who have restricted their spending along the way through, again, no fault of their own. They're just trying to get by, live within their means, and now with this, there could be a penalty involved in that with rising property tax rates. So that's one of those issues that we have to address.
Is there any chance that the legislature is going to move away from that particular iteration and come up with something that's more equitable, especially for the rural communities that are low spending?
Again, I think what I'm asking for is a fix to that. And I think there's some ideas amongst the conferees, and I think we can get through that. But I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you.
Tom Davis, Compass, Vermont.
Thank you. No questions today.
Thanks, Tom. Back to the room.
Even in your original plan with the 5 districts, there still would have been some communities, perhaps like Derby, that would have seen large tax increases. Would you support a foundation formula that allowed districts to spend less than 100%?
I know that's some of the ideas that are running through the conferees, but again, I don't want to negotiate this with the press. We'll let the conferees figure that out and with our input. So we're hoping to come to some agreement so we can have something we can all get behind, or most of us can get behind.
Kind of a different round of education. This idea started spring last year and kind of more into this year with the miscellaneous education bill, a cell phone ban that would be implemented in the school year 2026, 2027. I know there's other aspects of 480 miscellaneous education bill besides the cell phones, but I was just kind of wondering your stance on that if that were to get to your
On the cell phone ban or the whole bill?
Specifically the cell phone ban.
Yeah, no, I'm in favor of that. It's been successful here locally. Harwood did it successfully, and I'm in favor of it.
Are you familiar with other aspects of the bill?
I am not. I really don't. I don't know, unless somebody else wants to.
Governor, the federal appeals court recently ruled against Morrisville Water and Light, saying that they have to adhere to ANR's clean water permit. They say it makes operating the Green River Dam impossible, and it's falling on their ratepayers. they're calling on A&R to take ownership of the dam. Is that something that you see could be feasible?
We've talked about that a bit. I think there needs to be an assessment of the dam itself before we would contemplate whether we want to buy it. I mean, they put it up, they own it, they're responsible for it, and we might have an interest, but we need to know the condition of it before we move forward. Julie, Secretary Moore?
Just back to that, so we are in the throes of an engineering evaluation of both the dam and the dike that exist within that reservoir. Those studies should be completed later this year and will give us a clear sense of the liability the state would be assuming were we to take ownership of it. I think it's important to maintain the perspective. If the state was to take on the Green River Reservoir Dam, it would become the second largest dam in our state-owned portfolio, only behind the Waterbury Reservoir. So this isn't something to be entered into lightly.
The nuclear option, some have said, if the state doesn't take ownership of the dam, since Morrisville Water and Light is operating at a net loss here, it's falling on their ratepayers, is to shut down the dam, decommission it, and as I said, the nuclear option is to drain Green River Reservoir. I mean,
I thought you were talking about a nuclear option for their electricity. And I know there's been talk about that throughout the country, and we have some interest in that. But
nuclear as in like
yeah, I
fine
understand. I mean, we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it. That would be unfortunate. It is a great body of water. We have a lot of interest in that. But again, I understand the position that Morrisville Water and Light is in as well. If they can't make money doing it, they might have to contemplate doing something different.
Governor, I don't have all the details of this because I think it's fairly breaking, but I think there's been a federal court that's blocking some of Trump's reciprocal tariffs, which would prevent the 10% tariff, I think, with Canada from either going into effect or continuing. Can you speak a little bit about whether that's encouraging to you or whether you're tracking some of the tariffs and their impacts on Vermont?
Obviously, as I've said before, I'm not a big fan of tariffs that aren't surgical and just broad. And this seemed like a broad-based tariff against one of our neighbors. Someone they're our friends, and I thought that was unfortunate. And I think it's done some damage in terms of our relationship with Canada. Not that we can't mend that fence, but at this point in time, it's done some damage from tourism standpoint and just overall. So I think it's good news, but some of the damage has been done already, and I'm not sure that this will alleviate that.
But does the state of Vermont do anything to try to overcome the damage from the tourism drop? I was online yesterday, and there was an ad I was watching from the eastern provinces, I think, and it was kind of funny because this American goes up there and says he's an American, and they give him a big hug. It's like, hug it out. Like this effort to try to reconcile the stress and the strain between that's preventing tourists from coming back to Vermont. Are we doing anything to that?
Yeah, I think there are some entities that are, private entities that are working at that. I would say, I think J Peak might be doing some of that. But, we can't work too hard at that. We have to continue to maintain our relationship. I still speak with our premiers, our counterparts in Eastern Canada. We're going to have a meeting with them in Boston, I think in the next couple of weeks, to just talk about some of those issues and make sure that they understand, we're still with them. We want to work with them. They're obviously important to us from a strategic standpoint with the amount of Hydro-Quebec in particular, but just making sure that we're maintaining our relationship. I think that goes a long ways, and we should go and continue to go visit Canada ourselves, and hopefully that will bring them down here too.
Do you have any public-facing campaigns to encourage Vermonters to go north or Canadians to come south?
I don't know if we have anything Tate. Well, Tate is our Canadian representative here.
Sorry. Tate Brooks, Deputy Secretary for ACCD. Our Commissioner of Tourism and Marketing, Heather Pelham, actually is working on a summer campaign. So yes, that is in the works.
Okay, great.
Billboards, I think. All right, thank you all very much.